Hello, everybody. How are you all doing tonight? Hope you all having a wonderful night tonight. Welcome to our first episode ever of Pika's podcast, But My Parse. My name is Pika, and I will be your host and moderator tonight. We have a very special episode for all of you. Tonight, I am joined by my guests, Dobi, Trellsky, and Megasett to talk about the state of monks in Shadowlands 9.0.5. If you guys have any questions for our guests, feel free to ask them in the chat, and our moderators will pick them up to ask them at the end of the stream Q&A. All right. So monks have always seemed to be in a constant state of disarray in WoW. Brewmasters are an excellent all-around tank, and they've been the top pick for progressions since its inception. They are historically unkillable, yet very difficult to balance. Shadowlands' reduction in both base stagger and stagger scaling has certainly changed the tune of the spec. Windwalkers have been rapidly shifting from the top and the bottom of the meta in an ever-shifting state, while Blizzard can never quite find that perfect balance for them to be in the current DPS meta. And finally, Mistweavers, seeming to be built as the perfect melee-oriented healer, have been constantly overshadowed by their holy paladin counterparts. So, without further ado, let us introduce our guests for tonight. So, first off is Dobi. Dobi is a seasoned monk veteran who has been playing WoW for the last 16 years, 5 of those years being a brewmaster monk. He is a guild master of Nascent, a top 50 US guild, with 3 Hall of Fames under their belt, including most recently Castle Nathria. Since its start, he has been in a multitude of guilds, including Cuties Only in the Burning Crusade. And not only that, but he loves a good Long Island iced tea for peak efficiency. All right, Dobi, do you want to say hi to the chat?
Hey guys, how's it going? I push to talk on.
Is there anything you would like to add to your introduction?
You forgot the second beverage on my list, I believe.
Yeah, but that's too long. Everyone gets one beverage. You gotta be
I
consistent.
get two. You can't
All
forget
right.
the gin and tonic, the
All
splash
right.
of lime.
Gin and tonic and splash of lime. So anyone who meets Adobe in real life, that's what you can get them.
Yep,
All
that's how
right.
you butter me up.
Next on our guest list is Megasett. Megasett has been playing WoW since she was 8 years old. She has been crushing it as a Mistweaver monk since BFA Season 2, where she landed in the top 50. And then in Season 3, she was in the top 10 Mistweavers. She not only is a Mistweaver enthusiast, she also has been streaming for almost exactly 2 years to this date. A lot of it as a Mistweaver monk. Her favorite drink of choice? A good old grapefruit iced tea. All right, Mega,
There
do you
you
want to
go.
say hi?
Hey everyone, how you guys doing?
Did I miss anything to your introduction?
I don't think so. I think you got it.
All right, perfect. And then finally is Trellsky. Is that correct?
It's Trellsky, but you know what? I'll just go by Trellsky from now on, just for you, Pika.
The man, the myth, and the legend himself. Trell was a rank 1 brewmaster off and on the most part of BFA. He is also an MDI multiclasser who also plays as a tank main in the MDI. He is sponsored by BDGG. He is also the co-host of the famous Titan Forge podcast, and he plays Windwalker for Nascent. Trell has been playing WoW
Oh
since
my
the
god.
start of Legion, roughly 5 years ago, and has main monk since about halfway through Nighthold, where he started out as a brewmaster. His favorite drink of choice, you gotta hold it, wait for it, is an ice cold Dr. Pepper. Man of
That's right.
class. Man of class. All right, guys, I've
Hell
introduced our panel. So, how has your guys' day been? Are you guys excited?
I'm super pumped, man.
I'm pretty excited to talk about the monk class and all of its mini bugs and the progress we've randomly made over the last few expansions. Yeah.
Hey, Mega, are you excited?
Nervous, but yeah, I'm nervous, but I'm excited.
Nervous.
I'm glad
You
to
just
be
gotta
here.
you gotta be like Trell. You know, he's got like what 86
Chill.
podcasts under his belt now.
Oh,
All right. So, without any further ado, why don't we jump into it? So, for the first question for tonight is how do you guys think monks fare in comparison to their BFA counterparts? Let's talk about how they were in BFA compared to beta, to 9.0, and the current 9.0.5. And how have the changes impacted the class as a whole? So, Dobi, why don't you please start us off?
Brewmaster hasn't changed a ton from Nihilitha to now. Obviously, we got toned down a bit. I think over the last couple expansions, Blizzard has been toning down like Brewmaster steadily. It's been hard historically to tune Brewmaster. I think certainly in Warlords, even a little bit of Mop, Brewmaster is kind of insane, and we've seen how difficult it has been to balance stagger and how it scales throughout an expansion, and then the ever shifting problem of guard not having guard, iron skin brew shuffle, and them trying to nail down a cohesive playstyle. So coming out of BFA, they didn't like the iron skin brew 100% uptime things. I think it was spot on to change it. It was just a quality of life thing that was needed. There's no reason to need to press a button like every 7 seconds to maintain 100% uptime. So I think those changes are certainly great. I think the stagger changes on the whole, I think they're in the right direction. Maybe not quite the numbers I would have chosen. I think baseline
Like the
stagger
percent
is,
value stagger.
yeah, and like I think baseline stagger is like a little bit too low. Like they certainly nerfed how it scales with Agi throughout the expansion, like the coefficient on it. But I think like this first tier, all things aside, like we're a little squishier than we probably should have been. So it would have been nice to have a little bit higher base stagger, but I think the stagger scaling formula is probably fine if you consider 3-4 tiers. But other than that, shuffle being automatic's nice. Not having to press that button every 7 seconds on Iron Skin Brew is a nice quality of life change. I think a lot of the changes on the whole were pretty healthy to Brewmaster, but certainly not quite as indestructible as it used to be.
Did you play a lot of Brewmaster in beta in comparison to what it is now?
Not terribly much, frankly. I dabbled here and there. I know like for a while they didn't have magic stagger, which I think was a bug more so than anything else. I can't imagine having 0% magic mitigation wasn't a bug, but the reintroduction of spinning crank kick is nice for some added AoE damage. I think blackout kick going from 2 to 3 seconds is nice.
Oh, really?
I think
I hate that change, but it's just like a habit thing for me.
Yeah, I think haste scaling still has some issues with Brewmaster and how it's not super applicable to enough abilities. But yeah.
All right, that's great. And then, Trell, what do you think from the Mythic Plus standpoint to Windwalkers? What does it look like?
From like since just BFA.
Yeah, so like talk about like how does it feel? Does it feel very, very different from BFA?
It's hard to say because Windwalker could do really, really big damage in season 2 of BFA when it was fully uncapped and you got a lot of value off of having so many mobs with Mark of the Crane stacks up on them at all times with reaping. That was an awesome time for Windwalker. But then the target cap being introduced like really killed that aspect of it. But then recently it's also been buffed to the point where it's got some really good burst AoE again. So it's like come full circle, but it does the same job in a different way now.
Did you play it much in beta?
I didn't really play a lot of Windwalker in beta. I played more Brewmaster then, but the new interaction actually this expansion of Weapons of Order, since most Windwalkers need to be carrying for their Covenant, because it lines up so well with your use out cooldown or not use out, Zwen cooldown. is a really cool added feature of Windwalker, and I hope they keep Weapons of War going to the next expansion. Honestly,
So I'm guessing then you played a lot of beta as Brew. So how was it changed from like the Mythic Plus perspective? Because I know you must have done a ton of Mythic Plus in BFA. So how did it change in beta, and then does it change now in 9.0.5?
I mean, beta is always a roller coaster. Basically, whichever spec gets played the most is going to get nerfed eventually in beta because it's going to be the outlier because everyone's playing those specs. And so Brew went like up and down several times. You know, Frost Mage was really good at one point, then it got slammed down to the ground, and then Fire came up right at the last minute of beta. That's just how beta goes. So Brewmaster was really good at one point, and then it got kind of killed on the mitigation department toward the end of beta, and we've kind of been slowly being buffed up from that point. As Dobi mentioned, stagger got really low. I think it's an all-time low with normal stagger amounts and raid or mythic plus being in the 70% at mythic item
Yeah,
level,
it's
where
pretty low.
usually every tier it's somewhere in the 80% range of damage being staggered when it hits the monk. So we're feeling pretty paper.
But you said, but wasn't DH played like crazy in the beta? How did that get nerfed? Not get nerfed?
Yeah, that's just one of those anomalies. Sometimes Blizzard doesn't nerf the OP spec, you know, like Fire Mage exists and Vengeance Demon Hunter exists. So,
But
I mean, Venge was the
Warrior, they
underdog
nerfed
coming out of
Warrior.
BFA though.
yeah, true. And BFA Vengeance wasn't a meta tank in Raid or Mythic Plus.
So I think they're keen on giving it a shot in the limelight, so to speak.
Did pre-patch Brew feel any different? Because I know that's when they changed like the whole change of Iron Skin Brew to Celestial Brew, right? And then has that changed very much from, I guess now because you have Covenants, Soulbinds, and everything like that? Did it really make a difference, or does it basically play the same?
From my perspective in Mythic Plus, Brew actually felt like a godly spec at the end of BFA in the pre-patch because it basically had all the same stats it had in the last patch, but it also had Celestial Brew. So it basically just only gained a massive shield every 20 seconds in addition to everything else it had. And we didn't have Clash yet, I guess, but if we would have had Clash, that would have been like a super minor thing in addition to.
So do you in comparison, do you think it is stronger now, or do you think it was stronger in BFA? Same question, Dobi, for like rating Brew. Is it stronger now, or is it stronger before?
It objectively, it's hard to compare the two. I mean, you're talking late stage expansion kind of tank versus beginning of an expansion kind of tank.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's an inherent like comparison you can't really draw there, but obviously, I mean, BFA Brewmaster was pretty tanky, especially like Trell mentioned after Celestial Brew edition. But you know, I with the high verse that we had coming out of BFA on top of the high stagger levels, like it was definitely like pretty nutty. At the end of Nyalotha, like nothing could kill me, especially if you pop the cooldown, like dampen or something. So
Yeah.
compared to now, like we're certainly more squishy. I think when Celestial Brew was 30 seconds on the beta versus like 45 now, like it was kind of overpowered. In some respects, I would like a shorter cooldown on it with a smaller shield, but you know the build up to 10 purified chi with for the big shield's like a fun little mini game. So
That's right. I forgot it used to be 30 seconds long. That was like feeling probably too strong. It would have scaled
yeah,
out of control.
Good Nerf Brew, good Nerf Brew, right? That's the what we're getting
you
from
could
this.
get it down to like a 7-second cooldown or something crazy. So
All right, Mega, what do you think about Mistweaver? That is like a highly debated topic, you know? Mistweaver came from, I think it was like really strong at the end of BFA, especially in Mythic Plus, and then into where you can't even get invited in Group Finder as a Mistweaver if you don't have the IO to
Yeah.
back it up.
Yeah, I had to piggyback my monk off of my priest, unfortunately, to get in the pug. But it felt much stronger in BFA for sure, and I think everyone did. It's end of the expansion. You've got all the secondary you can get. You have corruption, you know, Azurite essences, all of the fun little things that we got towards the end. It made us pretty beefy, and it was very well rounded. I felt like a lot of the Azurite essences, and not just for Mistweaver, but for other classes too. They felt like they were really completed with Azurite essences and Azurite traits. And then when we lost those going into Shadowlands, it just kind of took a chunk out of the class, it felt like. And then even the ones kind of like Way of the Crane being an essence, and then we have Invoke Chi-Ji now, like the new version of Way of the Crane. It's still the same idea, but it's just worse. It's just not as good. We lost our damage, we lost the healing from it. It's just the new iteration is not quite as strong. So we
It's a
ended up losing
3-minute
out on a
cooldown,
lot of
right?
things. 3-minute cooldown. We
Instead
no
of 1.
longer receive a damage or healing buff. It's just a mana reduction and a healing speed reduction on enveloping. That's all we get. There is a little bit of I can't remember what the actual ability is called, but there is some passive healing from doing damage, but it's not nearly as much as it was from Way of the Crane.
Was there not a
So-
ton of
Crane was so
Mistweavers
fun.
on beta to to test everything?
Well, we tried. It wasn't working for a majority of it. A lot of the abilities just flat out weren't working. I know Venthyr. I think that the Venthyr Covenant was working only towards the last week or so, so it wasn't really an option to test. But we tried. We tried. But no, there wasn't a whole lot of us. There never is.
You what, Trell, Dobi? You guys didn't partake in Mistweaver? I know, Dobi. You try to work on Mistweaver time to time every tier.
I mean, certainly part of the allure to Mistweaver and Nyalotha was the Rising Mist build, right? That was an allure. That brought a ton of people to Mistweaver. But that only really lived for like what, 3 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, until it got fully nerfed. So it's kind of disappointing. Instead of toning it down, they kind of gutted it. It's fully going to the expansion. So, but I dabbled when I could.
Trell, did you have much experience with Mistweavers from BFA compared to now?
Yeah, I actually healed a KSM match as Mistweaver at one point, and that was a lot of fun. So I didn't play the raid build of it. I don't know the exact way you're supposed to play in raid, to be honest, in Nyalotha, and I haven't done my homework yet in Shadowlands either, but I plan to. But in Mythic Plus and Season 4 BFA, Mistweaver was super, super fun to play. I mean, you had Way of the Crane up for every single pack, basically. Twice on a boss, usually, or 3 times, and then in between those Way of the Cranes, you actually had to press healing abilities, which is kind of unfortunate, but most of the time you get to do damage, so it was very fun to play.
I do have to admit, though, it was a little concerning the fact that it was a quarter of our mana pool. It was 25% of our mana for Way of the Crane. If you didn't have Mana Tea up, that was a very large chunk.
But weren't you like immune? Wasn't your whole group like immune whenever you're using Way of the Crane? Like you just can't die.
Super strong.
It kind of feels like Wings does now for paladins. You're like, Wings is up, and you're like, okay, I'm safe, I'm good. But
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on how many targets were in the pool, right? Like if you got up beyond eight or 9 targets, then your Way of the Crane would probably top everyone every second. Yeah, depending on the damage going out. But now that we're target capped, that's not even possible anyway.
Oh, target cap. That is the topic that everyone loves to talk about. Did that affect all your guys' specs individually a lot? Like I know Windwalker, it must have really sucked, right? How did that feel, Trell?
Yeah, I mean, so since Mistweaver lost its damaging healing combination of Way of the Crane, I think it really only affected Windwalker and Brewmaster, and it's annoying for both specs in different ways. Like Windwalker, you kind of suffer and lose damage after 6+ targets. Brewmaster, it's not really annoying, but it is problematic on pull for threat, or if there are more than 5 targets for an extended amount of time. Because like when you're gathering, you need to be able to hit all the mobs with an equal amount of damage. You want to be able to get threat and not let someone randomly die. And RNG has to kind of choose that for you now. That sometimes.
Do you ever feel that in Raid Dobi? The target cap?
I mean, not a ton. Usually, like the fights, at least in Nathria, there aren't many that are going beyond 5. And especially for threat purposes, like you're right at 5 on Stone Legion Generals with the Goliath and the 3 ads and the boss. But threat is a struggle in raid for sure, and the target cap certainly doesn't help that. I think you might see it a little bit on Sun King when you're trying to pick up like a ton of ads that just spawned, and in P2, you often need a ton of MDs, tricks to get it all on you. Honestly, you can't really run. It's hard to run Statue in that fight because you more often want to use Ring of Peace for like CC on Phoenixes. So sometimes you're lacking the AoE taunt to make up for it as well. So it can be tough for sure. Part of me wishes like Cake Smash would still apply threat but not damage to unlimited targets. That would be a nice quality of life change, but yeah.
Mega, I know you were talking about how Mistweaver felt worse now because you lost a lot of like Azurite traits and essences. Were there a lot of Azurite traits that
Mhm.
like made the class that you don't have now, or was it like turned into talents, conduits, things like that, or legendaries?
So we lost the essence. We lost Way of the Crane, but that was turned into Chi-Chi in a kind of a twisted way. But the one that I personally missed the most was Secret Infusion. That made it a lot of fun. It made it a little bit more. It made it a little less brain off, I guess. Like you got to decide, okay, I'm gonna use it, on this pack so I can get a shorter Rising Sun, I can do more damage, or I'm gonna use it on this pack so I can use a mana free Vivify and then get that. I believe it was Mastery off of Vivify. Or okay, I know I'm gonna be popping Crane, so I'm gonna use Rising Sun Kick. I'm gonna get the verse from that, and then I'm gonna pop Crane and go nuts, right? Like it gave you a little bit more initiative of how you wanted to play. So I do miss that. I'd like to see that come back. In BFA, we ran two or three of those traits, so I'd like to see like 1.5 or two versions of that power. I don't think it would break anything. I think it would make a lot of Mistweavers happy for sure.
How about for Brew and Windwalker? Was there any kind of things like that that made it insane? I know Fists of Fury became like kind of a wet noodle now. Is that what it is for Windwalker?
Yeah, Windwalker, this patch, Fist of Fury is like one of the lowest priority spells outside of activating Whirling Dragon Punch with it because it just doesn't do a lot of damage. Like in the past, I remember playing Windwalker and Legion and BFA here and there. Fist of Fury was almost always a full channel, and like you try to time it at the right time. Nowadays you just don't care about it that much.
Now it's like a cancel, right? Or did that change in 9.0.5? Like I remember you had to cancel it and then your images would do Fist of Fury, but you'd be doing everything else.
So because it did so low damage in the beginning of 9.0, we were all canceling it basically anytime we were in CDs and or in AoE situations, so that you could tell your clones to cast other spells at the same time. Because clones were bugged and they would keep fisting as well as casting Whirling Dragon Punch or a couple other spells. Some spells don't overlap that way, or didn't before, but you
Does
could
that
game it to get more
change?
damage that way.
Does that change now that they buff Fist of Fury?
Yeah, so you don't cancel it nearly as much now. Now you only cancel it at like a certain haste threshold if it's more damage to just cancel it and press something else.
Hmm.
It's
And
getting there.
then yeah. How about you? How about you, Dobi? How about Brew? I know you did a lot of like the Ninzao, right? Like the Ox one. I forgot what it was called.
Yeah, training is now the mastery based on stagger level. Yeah, that was probably the best. Multiple of that was like for Brewmaster Azurite traits, you kind of wanted one of each for the utility it bring, not necessarily like with the 1 second reduction or the boiling breath, like healing, all that stuff. Like none of the traits actually like fundamentally changed the gameplay. They kind of just added small buffs to what you're already doing as a brewmaster. So when all those went away, like it kind of sucks you didn't have all the stuff like bolted onto your abilities anymore. And you didn't have all the free mastery just flowing in from training into Zhao. So I wouldn't say it changed like a ton, but all of those going away certainly detracts from the relative power transition across the expansion.
Yeah, it
I
seems like
certainly
with
think that
Monk ones. Yeah, go ahead, Troll.
I think the Brewmaster and Windwalker losing out on some BFA Azurite traits is much less impactful than it was for Mistweaver, because Mistweaver actually had the really interesting Secret Infusion, like Meg was saying,
Yeah.
where you
Mhm.
could actually choose what you do with it, as well as just having like some passive power from having it no matter what you did. Whereas R2 specs were just like, here's a tiny bit more mastery, or here's a chance for a proc. There's not like a lot of freedom and choice with that.
So they didn't add it into any talents for you guys because I know they did that a lot for like other classes whenever they got those Azurite traits, but didn't really seem to do that for you guys. They just kind of just left you out to dry.
Yeah, I mean, to Blizzard's
There might be a
credit, they do
passive.
have 36 specs to consider when they do all these things, and I think they left out a few of those things. Some of those Azurite traits return to legendary powers that you could choose to use, like the Celestial Infusion legendary takes the straight no chaser trait from BFA, which is a chance to get a free purify, basically.
Yeah.
True. So I guess what we can just move on to then is let's talk about, the highly fun debated topics of monk covenants. Covenants is something that's really important to Shadowlands. It kind of makes and breaks your class a lot of the time. And in Shadowlands, what do you guys think is the most or least impactful covenant for your whatever your respective specs or classes are? And why are there so little Venthyr monks? Like, what is wrong with it? Actually, I read up on monk. I haven't actually tried Venthyr monk myself, but it looks so cool. You summon like you open a portal, 24 seconds. You have like little minions come out. Is it not any good?
Well, the problem is, I think it's bad for all three specs. And like on a hybrid class like monk, you want to play a covenant that's going to be good for at least 2 specs, right? So it's almost like we just don't even consider it unless it's going to sim well for Windwalker or all of a sudden provide like a unique benefit. I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on that one?
I mean, to Blizzard's credit, like numerically, like the Venthyr ability that summons the dudes, if you can roll the numbers right, roll the dice right, it can be competitive. Certainly in like healing output or DPS output, depending on what you're going after. But the problem is the RNG factor. Like it's not fun to get like 3, Mistweaver spawns as like, a Windwalker or something like that. And then you just miss out on a bunch of damage because of RNG. There might be like some like bad luck protection or something built in. I don't really know. But it doesn't elevate your gameplay. Like you can't, it's just kind of a button you hit on cooldown, like, or when it lines up with something on a fight or a poll. It just doesn't elevate the gameplay into something like you can play around or optimize. It's just really boring to use, and there's the RNG factor. So
Yeah, Chad
Push
actually
the
brought up a
button and
good point.
forget
Like,
about it.
comparing that to something like Ashen Hallow, which is another long CD covenant ability, is like night and day. Like Fallen Order has bad RNG you can get. It just does damage. I mean, it also does healing, but it has the RNG of how many healers or damagers you get. And then Ashen Hallow is like this massive AoE damage healing, gives you free execute usage when you're inside of it. It's just completely different.
I love how you always go back to yeah, we have this, but Paladin just has it a little bit better. Paladin always has a little bit better. I'm sure Mega, has a hot take on that.
Yeah, we're just the worst version of Holy Paladin, unfortunately. As much as don't get me wrong, I love Mistweaver. I will play it forever. It's just not HPAL, right? So you look at all of the covenants, you're like, okay, I can do Necrolord and I can get this. This is okay for Brew, it's okay for Mist. Or, oh, I could be Kyrian and this is good for Brew and for Mist. I'm not sure about Windwalker. I've never played Windwalker, but and then you look at Night Fae, it was fine on beta, it got nerfed, it wasn't really worth it after that, and then you look at Venthyr and you're just like, yeah, no, I'm okay. That's just not gonna do anything for me.
If you guys
I think
had
it
your
says something.
ideal, what would you guys choose? Like, if you guys could be any of the covenants that you see, what would you want to be if there was no like numbers attached to it?
No, that's a good question.
You guys never thought about
I don't
that.
know,
You're all
like-
like min-maxers,
Nah.
like only play the best covenant. That doesn't matter about like how much you like it.
So you're talking about just based off of how much you like the ability?
Yeah, like when you
Regardless
play
of-
it, like does it like it makes it feel good, makes your class feel complete, but maybe it just doesn't, have the numbers behind it.
I think that's the difference for me for like my priest. If I wasn't Venthyr, I would like I Venthyr priest for raid. If I wasn't Venthyr, I feel like I'd be missing a big part of my rotation. But if I didn't have a covenant on my monk, I wouldn't really feel like I was missing something super influential into my gameplay. But
For me personally, I would actually prefer to play Night Fae or Bone Dust. Necrolord, that's the one on Brewmaster and Windwalker for like the animations and the quality of life. Like it's fun having a proc or an ability you can use when you're out of energy, and I think both of those covenants bring that as well as some extra AoE damage. But as far as mechanical gameplay goes, I would still be Kyrian for Windwalker because Weapons of Order is just so much fun to play around.
I do really like having Fleshcraft for sure. I don't feel like I need more mobility like from Night Fae or from Venthyr on my monk because we're super speedy, but File is huge, so Kyrian might win me over in that aspect.
What about you, Dobi? How's the Covenants feel for you?
I think I would think I really like Kyrian, especially for File. I think bleeds being such a menace to Brewmaster, like, and having an ability to remove them, at least on a lot of mechanics, not all of them, but a lot of them, kind of shores up at least a mitigation deficiency that Brewmaster has. On top of that, Weapons of Order is just a fantastic DPS cooldown and a slight mitigation cooldown with the Mastery buff that comes with it. So, on the other hand, I do kind of wish I could. I mean, I'm able to go Necrolord. It's not like terribly worse by any stretch of the imagination than Kyrian, but I kind of wish Bonedose Brew was a little bit better than it is now. I think earlier on in beta, it was looking pretty Gucci, but by the end of beta, it wasn't quite as powerful as it was. So that, I think, for me at least, kind of put Kyrian ahead. So I think aesthetically, I'd love to be a vampire, but the Covenant ability for Monk is just super boring and lame, as I've already mentioned. I really wish there was like a leech like cooldown or something that went along like
What if
vampire.
Fallen Order
You know?
gave your entire party group leech on a
Like
45-second cooldown?
like
Good.
it just feels so natural for a vampire to like leech life force or something like that, or drain your enemies of life. I don't know, but opening a random portal and dudes coming out of it, it's just so, it doesn't feel monk like at all to me.
Do you feel that, like, if, let's say, the number one monk in the world, whether it is for Mythic Plus rating or anything of the sort, do you think if the number one guy was Venthyr, would everyone kind of flock to Venthyr, or is it, no, these covenants make my class and I couldn't play it another way?
I don't think I would swap. People have such different play styles, and like it doesn't feel that influential, I guess. Like none of the monk, like I said about mind games and how Trell had mentioned Ashen Hollow, none of it feels like huge chunks of our rotation or anything. So I think that theoretically you could make any of them work, but you just might like some a little bit more than others.
How's
No
that feel
Night
for
Fae
you?
fans.
How does that feel for you, Charles? So, like, let's say Equinox suddenly starts playing Venthyr, where you're gonna be like, oh shoot, is Venthyr the play?
Dude, I think Equinox went through all the covenants recently. But no, like I have my own challenges. Like I play Windwalker and Raid, so I'm literally tied to Kyrian. Like I really don't want to sandbag my raid that much and
Are you
just
trying
try
to
out
say
different
something,
covenants.
Trell? Are you trying to say something about certain members of the raid team that may switch covenants
Yeah,
often?
yeah, we got this DPS warrior player named Pika that keeps swapping covenants
Any
to
Night
weird
Fae
stuff.
DPS warriors?
I'm Kyrian right now. Okay, I was Necrolord last week. It's a little bit different, but yeah. So I guess is Venthyr the one that you guys wish changed the most, or is there other ones that you guys wish changed more?
Honestly, I couldn't care less how bad certain covenants are. I just wish that we could swap more easily. I wish that we could try them out and experiment with them without being a detriment to some way to the people we play with.
I wish I could have something significant, I guess. I wish I could have an Ashen Hollow, but for Monk, or I wish I could have a Mind Games, but for Monk. I wish that the Night Fae was that for us with Phaline. I really liked how much damage it did. It didn't do that much healing before the nerf, but once they nerfed the damage, it started to feel much worse. But I wish that one was a little stronger.
Face Stomp
Misweaver.
resets, right? It has a chance to reset. Does it? It's like 6% or something like that. Does it happen often?
On beta, it did. It happened fairly often, and it didn't seem like you needed to be in combat. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I was able to reset it without actually being in combat, so that had a nice aspect to it.
Okay. So let's move on to the next topic then. Legendaries. This is always a spicy topic. You know, we had legendaries before in past expansions, but how do you think, how good are monk legendaries for the class in Shadowlands, and are they balanced? Or do you ever have choices in your legendaries? Are you ever like, in this situation or this boss, I'm going to use this legendary, and then in this dungeon or, you know, this event, I'm going to use this legendary? Or is it all like, there's one bis and then that's it? And then what kind of changes would you like to see to the legendary system, or an improvement on the current ones?
I'll start on this one. I think for most, maybe all three monk specs, at least Brewmaster and Windwalker, there's one clear winner, and then the rest are just like second tier or complete garbage tier. What's it like for Mistweaver?
I think they're actually fairly balanced. You look at a lot of Mistweavers and Keys and in Raid, and they're using Ancient Teachings, which is the fist weaving one. But like, I know that Monk Ting, I think he's #1 Mistweaver in the world right now. He's been using Tear. He's been using Tear of Morning.
Tier morning.
And he's been making that one work really well. But in Raid also, you see Clouded Focus, you see Invoker's Delight, you see Teachings, you see quite a few depending on the fight. So.
That sounds so fun for Mistweaver. Like it's not just
Well,
one
actually good
when
to
I
thing.
hear.
say the term, when I say it depends on the fight, I mean it's like it's Sun King or it's something else. You're taking Clouded Focus on Sun King for the single target, and then you're taking Teachings for the rest for Rising Mist and renewing maintenance. But Tier is pretty good for the Vivify Cleave, and Invokers is just haste. So
Yeah, and Invokers is the Windwalker best legendary by far still, and it just gives you so much haste in your burst window. It's just unreplaceable until they buff up the others that would improve your damage during burst as well. Like they've buffed the Zwin's battle gear or whatever it's called, the Zwin legendary that buffs your Rising Sun Kick and Fist of Fury from each other, but it's still not enough to replace Invoker's Delight.
Have you ever experimented with any other ones, Dobi? Other than the one that you made? Have you done Torghast after you made your Vis legendary?
Every week, hell yeah. I've got like 5 max Legos almost now.
Oh my.
No, I haven't been using Storm Stouts for a while now. I switched to Charred Passions for raids many weeks ago. I think Storm Stout's like fine. I think it's sort of overrated, at least in raid. Like it's nice to be able to like pool like 2 kegs for like SLG ad spawns, especially if you can chain it with Weapons of Order. You can get like really high stacks of Weapons of Order really quick. So you can really have powerful burst windows using it. But I think like Charred Passions is an interesting one because you have to trade off defensive value with Spinning Crane Kick. So Tiger Bomb versus Spinning Crane Kick. I think the balance changes to Brew Legos with 905 was a welcome change. It definitely shook things up. Like I know Invokers is up there now. I know Shahow's Might for single targets up there now, even though I hate the RNG aspect of Shahow's Might. I think there's certainly more options. Once upon a time, I thought we might use in Celestial Infusion, depending on how raid tuning went. Turns out, didn't really need to. So my opinion on the defensive Legos is still out there right this second, just because we haven't really been forced to, even though we've been kind of squishy, I guess, to use them. So yeah.
My
So
issue
then,
with Brew
yeah.
legendaries is that there like you were saying at the end there, the defensive legendaries just that's the only one. There's no other legendary for Brewmaster that improves our defensive situation at all. And most tanks have like 2 or 3 pretty decent choices as far as adding defensive value goes.
So would you
I
want
mean,
to see
Shahow's
one of
is
them
slightly
buffed?
defensive, isn't it? With the brew reduction.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could argue that the brew reduction legendaries count as defensive value because they would give you a few more purifies, but I feel like it's
So
not as big as a lot of the other specs have.
Yeah.
So what would you want to be like? What else? What other options of legendaries would you want to, you know, be very, very good? Is it just like tuning that needs to change it, like the numbers, or do they just need to be completely reworked?
I mean, for brew, I think it's weird. Like you have Legos like Charred Passions and Storm Stouts that are guaranteed modifiers of like give you X damage. Like there isn't an RNG aspect. I think it's really weird to throw in like a 40% RNG Lego like Xiaohao's Might. So I would like Xiaohao's Might to not be RNG, like balance the damage and the brew reduction accordingly. But I think the RNG aspect on that kind of sucks. It's just makes it unreliable. Obviously, nobody wants to be at the whims of RNG, both for their damage or their mitigation.
True.
And like, it's kind of disappointing that some of the other Legos didn't even get touched in 905. Like we have this roll Lego, like during a roll, you're immune to roots and snares. Like,
Woo!
sweet.
Half a second of root immunity. Time it with your in PvP versus a Resto Druid casting root on you somehow.
I don't even see the most casual player ever using that. So they probably should rework that one.
Wait. While we're on that topic, does anybody at all in this game actually make the Torghast legendaries, like the Torghast only legendaries?
Oh, I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah.
I don't
Like
think
looked at
so.
that. I looked at that today again. I was like, oh yeah, there's this legendary that gives you 25% more Phantasma. No, I'll never use that.
Like, why were those even made? Like,
I'm
if
sure
they're
somebody uses it.
Slash. There's like no way. I can't imagine a single person in the entire stream here that can link me a picture of them wearing that.
Maybe so you only spend 90 minutes in a layer 8 instead of 2 hours. I don't know. It's like the only thing I can think of.
And then Mega, how about you? Like, what legendaries would you like to see buffed that maybe you're not using right now?
I don't know if I would use any other than teachings, if I'm being honest, unless they completely reworked a couple of them. I think that changes involving ancient teachings, I would maybe like to see them change the proc rate. On beta, it was just passive and it did like 25% of our overall, which don't get me wrong, was great. It was a little busted, but it was great. But now what we have to do is we have to use Essence Font when we finish the cast or when we stop the cast. We get like 12 seconds of activity on our legendary. I would like it to be a less expensive trigger, at least. Essence Font is like 3,600 mana or something. It's one of our more expensive abilities. So I'd like to see either a nerf to the mana on that or a changed trigger, or just have it be passive and cut the damage by, or cut the healing done by a little bit. I think that's probably the biggest thing I'd change.
Would you use a legendary that brought back Secret Infusion from BFA for you, like over the one that you're using now?
Probably not. I personally don't like ranged monk. I don't like being back, and a lot of my healing will still come from ancient teachings. It's like 13 or 14% of my overall still. So I'd continue to use that one. I'd like to see Secret Infusion. You could make Rising Mist baseline, or you could make Secret Infusion a talent, or Secret Infusion baseline, and vice versa. But I don't think it would replace any of my legendaries.
And then Trell,
Maybe
any
it's a second
thoughts?
one.
As far as Mistweaver goes, no, I think Meg pretty much got anything I would say.
How about Windwalker? Would you like to see any of them changed or buffed so you don't only have to use the 33% haste one?
Oh, I mean, in a perfect world, I would love every legendary to be competitive. However, this is World of Warcraft, and things will remain hard to balance because there are so many things they create to balance for themselves. But like the cheat explosion legendary, I think is slowly getting fixed and buffed over time. It just got like 6 bug fixes, so it might be okay on AoE now.
What about
Stuff
the
like that
Crackling
is-
Jade one? That one that they used to be a really good legendary, right? Back in the
Yeah,
day.
that was a pretty cool one. It's the Crackling Jade Lightning one is the Emperor Capacitor from Legion, where every ability you spend chi on, I think, it stacks up to make your next Crackling Jade Lightning do Omega damage. So it is fun to like throw in a well-timed huge damn Crackling Jade Lightning when you're like kiting from a boss in a raid encounter or something.
Do you guys prefer legendaries that change your entire play, kind of like how tier sets used to kind of do that? Or do you prefer that you keep your play and it just buffs you in a certain way? Like, for instance, gives you an extra charge of Keg Smash, which is like a buff of damage, plus it's a quality of life, right? That you'll always have that second Keg Smash. Or do you prefer your whole gameplay being changed?
If I had a
It
clear,
depends.
oh sorry,
Go
go ahead.
Okay, Dobi, you go
I think it
first.
depends. I think it depends. Like, there are things that could change your gameplay in a bad way. Like quality of life additions, I don't necessarily think change your gameplay. Like the extra charge a Cake Smash, which means you don't have to be always pressing Cake Smash and cooldown. You have that. You kind of have a window because of the second charge. I think you have to be careful because of borrowed power reasons. Blizzard's been, they've been bitten in the past from augmenting gameplay with like artifacts and stuff like that, and even tier sets where like, a class starts to feel really good and you have to take it away, and then it's like not. So I know I kind of like where Legos are right now, where it's kind of like I don't think it's like a huge overhaul to how you play, but like a substantial enough like modification that it's impactful.
If Mistweaver had a clear, play style, then I would like just a modifier or a buff to that. But Ancient Teachings is what really allows you to actually play Fistweaver. Otherwise, you're going to be wasting all of your mana on Vivify, and then you're not really going to have the damage to do any DPS. So if I was given, if Fistweaving was a very clear build and that was like the way to play Mistweaver, then I would like a modification instead of like a completely different playstyle. But because my legendary right now is the way that I play that, I would like it to stay the way that it is so I can continue to fist sweep.
All right, Trell.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
I always like quality of life changes. Like I actually really like the Keg Smash legendary that gives you 2 charges in general. I mean, but if it was tuned really low and didn't do any damage, then it wouldn't really matter, right? I would take the better option.
And then I guess the last question I have for you regarding legendaries is the community hype, community perception of hoping double legendary becomes a thing. So if you guys had 2 legendaries that you could use, like right now in their current state, what would you choose?
Uh,
I think it would heavily depend on what you were doing.
Go with Teachings and Invokers.
yeah, I think Invokers and Storm Stouts would pair really well.
That's true. That would give you a lot of Keg Smashes.
Yeah,
you just want to be tossing those barrels, right? That's all you want to be doing.
Yeah, like again on the defensive legendary thing though, I think Brew only has the one that's like kind of impactful across a lot of defensive value. Whereas other tanks, if they get 2 legendaries, they're just going to be unkillable machines. Like Blood DK and Bear have 2 very, very good defensive legendaries, whereas Brewmaster just has one kind of good one.
All right, let's move on to conduits. Dobi, I know you had a little bit of a Twitter talking about conduits. Why don't you tell me your feelings on the conduit system, and do they matter for Monk in Shadowlands? And if do they need to be buffed? Do they need to be changed? And do they matter?
Well, matter is a strong word. I think some of the potencies are impactful, which is nice. Although it's like you get your 2, your Walk with the Ox, and the other one I forget the name off the top of my head. It's like Strike with Clarity. Yeah, you get like Walk with the Ox, Strike with Clarity. Then you're kind of done. Like I don't think there's enough competition in potency. Like Scalding Brew is a little bit too weak to compete. And I think like everything else is like kind of meh. For endurance, like there's really one decent one that's Harm Denial. It's kind of disappointing we didn't get buffs or any kind of tuning in 905 because I think some of the conduits are criminally undertuned, like Evasive Stride.
They're so bad.
Evasive Stride does like no healing. Like I understand there's a fine line with like the proc rate on that thing, but it definitely needs to get tuned or changed or replaced or something. And then like the finesse, like I feel like they're onto something, but they just have very little application. Like the finesse, like some classes have really interesting finesse conduits. I don't think Monk has terribly interesting ones.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like Druid has like this awesome raid utility with several of their conduits, and then Monk has these finesse conduits that are straight garbage in any PvE content, basically. Like give you movement speed after Transcendence. Great. You don't really need it as a monk. You have tons of mobility outside of Transcendence. In PvE at least. And then what is it like?
PvP.
Reduce the damage targets do after sweep is over which is kind of useless in raid. And then after you paralyze something, it moves slower for a second. Great conduit.
How about Mistweaver? Does it matter at all for Mistweaver?
Yeah, if you're Mistweaver and you're Necrolord, you're gonna want Bone Marrow Hops. If you're Fistweaving, you're gonna want Jade Bond. But other than that, it's like they're fairly insignificant. I'm running Harm Denial mainly just because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I even had something in that slot or not. It wouldn't impact my gameplay at all. So it's in there just for me. But
So if you
Yeah,
guys
like, do you even
stick
use
to your
Expel
topic,
Harm as Mistweaver?
I use it actually a fair amount. It with Expel Harm, it kind of does like half of a health pot maybe, but it's not gonna save me from anything. It's just kind of like I want to be full health. It doesn't matter if I am or not, because if I wanted to make sure that I was full, I would vivify. But it's just kind of like a little maintenance.
Yeah.
so do you guys, if you guys are playing your main spec, let's say you're playing Brew, whether it's a Mythic Plus or Raid, do you guys ever run out of conduit energy like other classes? Like some people have to switch to conduits like based off their fight. I know like one of our rep paladins in our guild, like Lucid, I swear to God, he always has to hearth out and like I'm changing my conduits, like summon me back, summon me back. Does that happen to you guys in with your guys' specs?
Absolutely. For me, I
Yeah.
play Windwalker and Raid, and then I play Brewmaster a lot outside of Raid, and I have to manage like what I want to min max in my life each week. So I can just like I'll have to pick some fights in Raid where I had to do like slightly less single target damage because I have to keep the conduits because I'll run out of conduit energy otherwise. It's very annoying.
Tree glare.
How about you, Mega? Does it change for you depending on the content that you're doing?
I'll change out 2 of them. If I'm raiding, which I just raided on it on Mythic for the first time this week. We started alt raid, so I was allowed to bring it so graciously. But Rising Sun Revival, I would swap out, but that's like the only one.
Yeah, I mean you have to swap your potencies, right? Like between specs, like that's just 2 every
Yeah.
time. Like
Yeah.
otherwise you take a hit on one of them, like Trell said. Like I kind of wish the other Soulbinds trees weren't so funky in some of these covenants, so that like it'd be more feasible to have like a spec dedicated to a Soulbind specifically.
What do you mean? Trell tells
but-
me he loves Braun all the time. Don't you love
Oh
it?
god. Yeah, so Braun's my like throwaway out of conduit energy tree. So I play Brewmaster on it and keys sometimes, and Braun just like shows up and knocks shit everywhere and does like keeps people from stealthing, and it basically just makes it worse. Like that tree is somehow a downgrade over
yeah,
borrowed power.
it's just like if you have to give up a potency like as Brewmaster, like it's just not an option. Like you would never trade a potency for finesse. Like even though like there might be like Dratnos is talking about this on the Titanforge podcast for like File of Patience, in Pelagos's tree, which is under the finesse conduit. Like that's objectively better than Focusing Mantra, but like you'd never choose it because Brewmaster has literally no good finesse conduits. So you just like don't go that way. Like if they could balance them and make them more appealing and even situational, like maybe I activate that that path for one fighter or for a raid night or something, like if I'm doing prog on one boss, like just activating that path and then switching back. Like I think some of the paths and like aren't used because of a lack of conduit palettes.
Hmm. So then, is there any of the conduits that specifically that you would want to be buffed? Like any of them that you think have potential to be good, but they're just not doing the numbers right now?
See Jade
Uh,
Bond. I'd like to see the cooldown reduction on Chi-Ji. I mean, first of all, I'd like it to be a 2-minute instead of a 3-minute, but just talking about the conduit itself, I would like to see more than 0.3 seconds reduction. And maybe just an additional, give us something that actually matters, I guess.
Yeah, like
That's
something that
everybody.
alters your gameplay at least, right?
Yeah.
Like condos just feel so small for a monk.
Yeah.
Oh, damn. Okay. So then I guess we can move on to our next
Sag.
one. I know the
Very
next
sound.
topic is everybody loves, which is we're talking about monk bugs and why do you think they take so long to get fixed by Blizzard? I mean specifically monk. You guys always seem to have something broken, and it's either broken in a good way or broken in a bad way, but you're always broken. And what are some of the most annoying bugs in the class that have yet to be fixed that you think that needs to be fixed, like Storm, Earth, and Fire? So, Trell, why don't you lead us on that?
Man, that's a really big question. I don't even know if there is a bug that I like need fixed at this moment. There's always so many. They fixed quite a few though, just recently for the first time ever. I swear, like they've gone years with all these bugs with Storm, Earth, and Fire, and they've fixed one or two here and there, but there's always been like a huge list remaining. And they finally doubled down and tried to fix quite a few back to back.
Yeah, no, a lot of these fixes lately have been awesome. Super glad to see them. I don't know if they're a result of memes or what, but really welcome changes. All these bug fixes. I think most of the big ones have been knocked out. There's still some medium to small ones, but definitely making good progress, and hopefully they keep it up.
So, would you consider like the one for Windwalker that applies for your spinning crane kick, whatever, that was applying to dead targets and like continuing on? Would you consider that a bug, or was that like just changing the gameplay?
That was definitely unintended, so I'd say it was a bug. But it definitely made Windwalker very, very strong in AoE, and then they were tuned around that because they weren't aware of that bug, I suppose. So that going away was kind of detrimental. Like the 1 week that was fixed, but they hadn't buffed Windwalker again yet. That was it felt really bad to do AoE. But then they at least gave us some compensatory buffs to at least bring it back up.
All right, Mega, tell me all about the Mistweaver bugs. There's none, right? Mistweaver is a perfect spec.
Yeah, no, not a single one. There's not any bugs that I'm aware of. I think that there was an issue, as chat was saying, that there's a night phase stomp issue with if it's too close to a wall, it's not doing damage. I'm not night phase, I didn't know, but um, I feel like there's something. I feel like someone forgot a negative sign somewhere on our mana costs or on
Oh
our
no.
damage or something. There has to be something wrong. They can't have done this on purpose.
But so
So
why is
Apparently
it
there's
Monk that's always bugged?
Manatee makes it cost 50% more.
Like, why is it Monk? Why always Monk is the one that has the long-term bugs? Like, I know we have like everyone's so surprised that Vengeance Demon Hunter recently had that huge bug, right, about their demonic wards. But when you see a Monk bug, people are just like, oh yeah, that's just another day. We found a new bug. All right, cool. Let's just add it to the list. Like, why does it take Blizzard so long to fix these things, or why are there so many bugs?
I think part of it is how much those specs get played. Like, I certainly think there's a correlation between popularity and attentiveness to bugs and tuning. Like Windwalker and to a lesser degree, like Mistweaver, they're some of the lowest played specs in the game. So like attention just isn't like given to them on these bugs. So as soon like maybe it is coincidental, maybe it isn't, but if Windwalker is like near the top for a tier suddenly, and it's very popular, like Trill is really putting it in the limelight in World First Race and stuff like that. Like, is it a coincidence like Blizzard pays attention and realizes all the funky things Trill's doing to like make the spec work and do huge damn? Like, probably not. Like, they probably key in on some of that. So I think some of it is exposure.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think the Mistweaver stuff. There's all kinds of bug tooltips I hear as well. I think if that was ever the highest throughput spec for an entire tier, it would probably be noticed finally and fixed. And like Dobi was saying, the Windwalker stuff finally came into the limelight, and so a lot of it was fixed recently.
as
So you
far
just
as
need
actual like gameplay bugs, though, I don't know if there is any. Not like the Windwalker ones, not even close.
So you just need the best players to be playing Monk so they can fix all your guys' bugs for you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that is kind of how it goes in this game.
Okay. So then how do you guys feel Monk scales or will scale throughout Shadowlands? I think Babylonius had a spreadsheet talking about it in the Monk Peak of Serenity, but people are saying it's starting to feel dated and doesn't apply so much with the new recent changes to Monk. And how do you guys feel like it's going to scale from, the end of Castle Nathria to, the next raid, the domination one, to beyond, right? Like, how is Monk going to be always good, or are they going to start falling off?
Well, there's a lot to answer that one. I think first thing is
Yeah.
Monk has a debuff that you have to have one of in the raid. Scaling wise, I think any class that has versatility as their main stat that they want to get is not going to scale as well as other classes. So
Yep.
stuff like Boomkin and Fire Mage is always going to scale better than stuff like Windwalker, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's lessened because of the diminishing returns they put on secondary stat scaling on other classes. So I think, like, relatively speaking, like, Windwalker will probably scale better because of the diminishing returns on everyone else.
True.
But nothing's really fundamentally changed. Like, I don't think the coefficients are terrible right now. And there's still things that could come out of the woodworks, like, set piece bonuses and stuff like that, and that could really make the difference for Windwalker. And then obviously fight design on top of that, etc. So I'm with Trell, like, verse being one of the better stats, like, doesn't bode well for sure. But I think it's going to be closer than it has been in the past.
Mega, what do you think? How are you going to scale?
Mistweaver's a healer. It's gonna scale with main stat, like all of them except for Holy Pally. So it'll get stronger as we go, but again, it'll cap out. I don't think there's gonna be anything like super huge. So
What's the main stat priority for Mistweaver? Sorry, I forgot.
for fist, I don't know what it is for range, but for fist weaving, you want like anywhere from like 18 to 21% haste, maybe even a little more, and then crit and verse.
Oh, so it's scaled
I've
pretty
been
well with
running.
haste then, right? Wouldn't that be really, really good for you as the expansion goes on?
Yeah, but you want to be around like 19 to 21 ish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you'll grab haste until you hit that, and then the rest will just be crit and verse. That's
Okay.
that's only for melee. I don't know about ranged. I'd assume more crit probably.
So then how would you guys rank your specific specs and roles in the current meta of WoW? Like, how do you feel in the, like, DPS and tanking? Where would you rank rank yourselves? And then how does that look going into 9.1?
I mean, it's called Meme Weaver, so that should give you a pretty good idea of where it's at. I don't see that changing going forward. There's not really any worse healer that you could bring into anything except for Torghast. Like, we'll rock Torghast, but just about anything else, there's a better choice, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. Premium content of Torghast,
Mhm.
hit Mega up if you guys want any fast Torghast carries,
Yeah, dude.
She's working at those.
Corrosive dosage, true. That should be a legendary. That would be sick for all three specs.
It should.
Yeah, I think it is very good.
So would no
something
Mythic
like that.
Plus affix that you can think of, like in the past, bring Mistweaver up a tier at all?
Well, Mistweavers are very good at Grievous, actually, because Grievous is removed with application of Renewing and then Vivify Cleave also. So it's kind of like
Oh, that is good.
penance. Yeah, so if you get your Renewing on everyone, you can just go down your frames and Vivify each person, and you have one stack on everyone. Even if you started with 4, it's just going to be 1 on everyone. So they're very good at that. They have Diffuse Magic. They can get rid of the bursting stacks. They have Vivify for the Revival for the bursting stacks. It's pretty good there. They've got Ring of Peace for Necrotic. They've got Ring of Peace for Spiteful, things like that. But it's all Priest can do it better.
Yeah.
Priest can do Mass Dispel. Paladins, or not Paladins, sorry. Paladins bring the damage, but I think that Mistweaver is probably the best healer for Grievous.
So you heard it first. Mega wants Grievous to be the seasonal affix for next season. All right, so everybody
No,
here,
'cause I have a priest still.
everybody
I still have
Grievous,
Discipline Priest.
every
Yeah,
key,
man.
no matter what you're
No.
doing.
Mm-mm.
All right, Trell. Where does Windwalker stand right now in Raid and in Mythic Plus tell us a little bit where about that stands.
So Windwalker is like dead middle of the pack on single target for rating, and it doesn't like have enormous burst single target. It has pretty good burst and longer sustain damage, I'd say. So it can be really good single target damage, but it has to have the right conditions. Otherwise, it's about middle of the pack. As for AOE, it bursts very, very hard on like 4+ targets on AOE now with the recent changes. I think it's probably the best burst AOE class at that point. So that makes
Better
it
than
pretty good in
Havoc?
keys. Maybe, yeah. Honestly, if it's like 5 to 8 targets, I think Windwalker's probably the best. In keys, I think it's really good. It's not a rogue. It would compete with the rogue spot. Right now, the meta is Fire Mage, Boomkin, and then a melee class. So it would replace the rogue, which would be trying to make up a lot of utility as well. Rogue is doing decent damage as well, so it's hard to argue if you want to bring a Windwalker. There's also the argument of Covenants, though, and so since Windwalker's Kyrian, it's one of the only Kyrian classes that you would see in Mythic Plus, aside from most tanks. So let's say a tank class became favorable toward Necrolord, Warriors, then maybe Windwalker would be the play in that group.
No, but does it change anything for Brewmaster looking in like Brewmaster Mythic Plus?
I mean, going into the next patch, no. Really, the only thing that's changing Brewmaster is the 10% tank DR buffs that are happening tomorrow. Like that's the bigger thing for Brewmaster, other than scaling or anything going into next patch. I think bringing them up and adding an additional layer of DR before stagger is taken into account is huge for Brewmaster, especially considering other tanks. So I think it'll lessen the gap between Vengeance and Brewmaster, and Brew will be like probably a close second to Bear and Vengeance.
So then Dobi for rating, then does that change like where Brew would stand? Because I know you were a bit worried about where Brew would stand at the end of like Castle Anathria and going into 9.1, but now with the recent changes of Vengeance Demon Hunter getting a little bit nerfed, like how does that change your thought process of what tanks you're going to bring in 9.1?
I think the recent changes that Trell just mentioned, with the 10% DR across the board, both Fizz and Magic, I think they certainly changed the equation a bit. Obviously every tank has strengths and weaknesses. I think Brew's just kind of an all around tank. Not a master at any, but kind of good at most. You obviously want a monk debuff in the raid. Windwalker brings that, obviously. I think Havoc is still slightly undertuned, so you definitely probably still want a Venge tank. I don't think Venge is like they're going to take a hit. It's like 15% in magic mitigation relative to Brewmaster with all the changes. But I think they're still going to be competitive, especially with like Firebrand build and stuff like that. So I think the playing field is relatively good in terms of the matchup across all the tanks. Like probably better than it's been in quite some time, surprisingly. I think Brewmaster is still going to be middle, mid to upper pack. So not like in the worst spot, but it's not going to be like a top tier pick. Probably might be like second, third. It really depends on the fight. Like, there's not a one size fits all. Like, if you need heavy physical mitigation, like Warrior is going to shine there, etc. So obviously depends on the conditions. But I think it's going to be certainly very viable going into next raid tier, I imagine, unless we see some weird stuff in fights that doesn't synergize well with stagger or there's bleed issues, etc. So.
All right. Then the last major question I have for you guys before we jump into the community Q&A. This one's a big one, and I know Mega will have a lot to say about this one. But what are any major changes you guys would like to see to your class going into 9.1 to either make it more fun or more competitive in the current meta? And Mega, why don't you take the lead on this? Like, how would you like to change Miss Weaver?
How long do we have? All right.
Wait, hold on. Let me actually set the cap. Is this gonna be two hours on this
list
conversation?
you just pulled up?
Yeah. How long do we have? So I'll go quick. I'll try and make it relatively short. Fun is competitive, first of all. right? Or competitive is fun, I guess. Worded the other way, but not getting invited to things because I'm a green healer instead of a pink one. It's kind of like, okay, well that makes it instantly half as fun. But in terms of class changes, monks and our shamans are the only ones right now that don't have an external DR. We have Fort Brew, but we have Cocoon as our external, which is an absorb and a healing increase from HOTS is 50 seconds or 50% for the duration of the ability, and that's on a 2-minute cooldown. That is quite possibly the worst external in the game. I'm just gonna say it. Like it's not. I don't really think that's an opinion.
I
think
just
that
saw
is
Dobi do
probably
the
the worst
nod right
killer
there.
external. Yeah, like it's pretty crap.
Yeah, whenever you're tanking
well,
something in raid and you see the only life cocoons available, you're just like, ugh.
you're like, I only have
Kill
these
me.
cooldowns. Yeah. So I'd love to see that reworked into a DR somehow. It could be the absorb shield with the DR like 30 to 40 like paints up on a 3-minute cooldown, instead of the healing increase. Or if it was shorter, it could be 15 to 20% DR, on a minute and a minute and a half, like Iron Bark. I understand wanting to keep healer identities and class fantasies and stuff, but to a certain extent, there's just things that you can't go without. You can't push content without, and a DR I think is one of those. Whereas Shaman kind of makes up for that with Spirit Link. Monks don't really have anything like that. Obviously, I'd love to see mana nerfs and mana buffs and damage buffs, but pretty much any way that Cocoon could be reworked would most likely be beneficial. If they don't want to turn Cocoon into a DR, like a residual healing buff would be nice if it lingered after the Cocoon. I know that Nourishing Chi does that, but it's first of all still only HOTS, and second of all not worth the potency conduit that you are giving up. So if it could be reworked, that would be nice. I was thinking something along the lines of Rapture. It's a minute and a half cooldown. On my priest, I can get a single shield for about 25k, which is the equivalent of my monk's 3-minute single target CD, and I get as many rapture shields as I can cast in the duration of the buff. So if we had something like the combo point system that rogues have, put that on friendly targets, let us have combo points on our party, let us consume chi as a resource, and give everyone kind of a shield with party-wide cocoon. I think that would be reasonable. And that could be on a 3-minute, that would be fine. But that's the major thing. Again, I'd like to see Secret Infusion back, baseline maybe, to like 1.5 or 2 times the power of one trait, and then Old Manatee. I didn't play Monk back in MOP. I was like 12 years old or something, so I didn't actually get a chance to take advantage of it, but it was where you would get 40, I believe, 40 stacks of Manatee, 2% mana per stack, so you could get 80% of your bar back, and you would have to channel and drink. I think that is really dynamic, and that would really open up a lot of opportunities for monks in raid and in keep, so they're not so starved all the time.
All right, Dobi, how about you?
Revival.
Delete revival.
Say that again.
Would you change revival?
If you would have asked me in BFA, I would have told you yes. I don't have as much of an issue with it now. In BFA, you pop it heals for about 30k after the stat and level squish. You pop it now, it heals for about 30k. So it's kind of like, damn, it really sucked back then. It would be nice. Yeah, it did. You push it and nothing happens. You're like, did it go off? I don't even know.
It was basically a massive spell. That's all it was.
That's how I used it. And honestly, that's sometimes how I'll still use it, but I don't have as big of an issue with it now as I did before. I'd much rather have a DR. And give me Old Way of the Crane back. Let me do damage. But yeah. I think that's most of it.
All right, Dobi, how would you change
bunch
brew
else,
then?
but-
How would you change brew in raid?
I mean, not specific to raid, but I would give us a little bit of a bump on baseline stagger. Maybe at least 5% baseline would be nice, to carry us through the rest of the expansion. Some more competitive talents would be sweet. Like something other than high tolerance, which we have run for literal years.
True.
Ever since we couldn't run blackout combo in Legion for DPS. So something more competitive in the The level 50 row would be fantastic.
What about that useless offensive talent that's on the same row as Light Brewing?
Spitfire, yeah, a rework of Spitfire, which has questionable application, and again, 25% as an RNG proc is just straight up not fun. Nobody likes to use that. It's incredibly RNG, and it's just not very impactful. Like you'd much rather have an extra brew. So, but talents are whatever they are. I might be jumping ahead on questions, but maybe some adjustment to like mastery. I think there's severe diminishing returns on elusive brawler with like the whole, it just deletes all your stacks when you get one dodge. It'd be nice if like that got changed to like take 2 or 3 stacks when you did a dodge, just so that it scaled a bit better to higher values. And you cool, could kind of play around it. Like there are times where like I can build up a 9 stack because I'm off tanking, and then like it's just irrelevant because I take the boss and then I'm guaranteed a dodge, and then all that hard work's gone. So it'd be more rewarding if elusive brawler could be better scaled in that regard.
That's true. Sometimes you finish a boss on Mythic Plus that doesn't do physical hits, and you have like a 700% chance to dodge the next melee.
Yeah. It might be broken, but maybe there's a cap on the amount of stacks you'd be able to get for elusive brawlers, so it wouldn't be. But yeah, they could do something more there, I think.
Trell, how do you feel about that then for Windwalker or Brew Mythic Plus? What would you like to change? What would you like to see changed?
Windwalker actually wouldn't change too much. I think they've done a good job fixing most of the bugs and making up for it. Like this last tuning pass was great. The only thing I'd say for Windwalker is slightly more single target damage, but it's hard to do that and not make AoE absolutely bonkers. So I'm not sure how they would do that. As for Brew and Mythic Plus, I think the larger problem this season is that you need so many borrowed power things to let you survive the pulls.
You know, like Cardboard Assassin?
Stagger. Yeah, you need freaking cardboard from all your friends to allow you to stand near the mobs for more than one GCD.
Cardboard armor.
I mean, that's the same for most tanks, but even still, it would be nice to see more self-healing on Brewmaster just baseline, like put more of the self-healing from Celestial Brew into Gift of the Ox.
Yep.
Give us some of our stagger back, how it was in Iolotha would be great, like 75 to 80% stagger while in combat is up there with feeling good. Not feeling like
orb healing is quite low, isn't it?
Yeah, Gift of the Ox is super low. So basically, like these days, you run into a pack, you press your biggest absorb trinket you can find, you get an external from the healer, then you press Celestial Brew as soon as you get enough stacks, and then you run after that because you just literally can't tank without all that up.
Okay, well, then that ends our main topics that we were going to cover tonight for the podcast. So I guess we're going to move into community questions. So the community questions are derived from a Reddit post that we posted earlier this week, and I'm sure there's lots of fun questions from Redditors, but also some questions from the chat here tonight. So yeah, if you guys have any questions in the chat for our guests here, our mods will grab it and we'll be able to ask them during this part of the session. But let's just jump into some of the ones that we have from Reddit. So this one's directed at you, Trell, but like anyone can answer if you guys have any input on the situation. But how can Brewmaster compete with without DH buff in Mythic Plus? I know as a prot warrior, I feel that all the time, right? My Boomkin and Mage are going, if I could, if it was a Demon Hunter, I'd be doing 5% more. This would have died. Why aren't you a Demon Hunter? So I'm sure Monk also, suffers from that thing.
I mean, to be honest, the 5% buffs don't matter nearly as much in Mythic Plus as they do in Raid. After seeing so many seasons of Mythic Plus go by the last few years, it's like it doesn't matter what Chaos Brand or Mystic Touch or whatever your class brings for the group, aside from being able to live super well as a tank and being able to hold aggro really well in like any given situation. And if you have that, then if multiple tanks have that, then you compare their damage, and that's when Chaos Brand Mystic Touch starts to come into play. But I mean, this season it just doesn't matter. Like Demon Hunter can survive so much better than Monk. It's not even close. Like Chaos Brand just doesn't matter at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the next question we have is for Mega. What can Blizzard do to make Mistweavers able to compete in Mythic Plus on an even footing with other healer specs? And do you think they even want to do that when Brewmaster and Windwalker are already so strong?
I don't think that other specs performing well in your class have any indication on what your spec should be doing. I think that that's a really bad way of looking at it, considering like maybe if it was all DPS specs, then maybe that would make a little bit of sense. But because Monk has all three, I think that that would be a really bad idea to buff or nerf one based on how the other's performing. But in general, it was the utility question about what could Mistweavers be given so that they're on even footing.
Mhm.
Outside of flat mana and damage buffs, because that's always going to be the answer, right? So outside of that, and I don't know how many people are going to agree with me on this, but I think that they should completely scrap ranged Mistweaver. I don't think that that should ever be an option. We're all of our offensives, with the exception of Crackling Jade, but that one doesn't count because it doesn't actually do anything. They're all melee. Sludge Fist, you're considered melee. Keys, you're considered melee. You get every melee mechanic. You are not a ranged player. You shouldn't be able to, build a healing style based off of that because you simply aren't. So I would like with that to see a little bit of a rework on the talents. Rising Mist could be, if you want to commit in full, say, okay, Mistweaver is HPAL 2.0. We'd have to fully commit and not have any kind of ambiguity, I guess, if that makes any sense. Like they need to just commit to fist weaving. Rising Mist could be baseline, reintroduce Secret Infusion, reintroduce, Chi as an option, and then just buff our melee damage. There was a question that I had read through, and it was actually a really good point. They'd mentioned that Mistweavers, unlike Brewmasters and Windwalkers, we don't have a unique ability to Mistweaver. We have RSK, Tiger Palm, and Blackout Kick, which all of the specs have. We don't have something like Fist of Fury or Keg Smash, and I thought that was a really good point. I'd never thought of that. So immediately my mind goes to Torghast, give us Corrosive, right? I was trying to do the math on it the other day, so we'd have to have it to like a quarter of the power that it is right now in Torghast, or cap how many Vivified targets it can be on, or something like that. But I think that that would be really neat. Give us kind of a concentrate on the move type thing. So that would be really, really cool to see, I think. And then just in general, I think that the rest of it would just be mana buffs and damage buffs would take care of the rest. Maybe a little bit of unpruning on Cocoon and things like that. But
So do you think it would be fixed by separating the specs to something like fist weaving and mistweaving, sort of like how Disc and Holy are two different specs, so turn Monk into a 4-spec class, like a Druid?
True.
No,
Let's
man.
delete
I don't
Windwalker,
think
actually.
Blizzard can't even make one Mistweaver spec. Like Blizzard can't even make one Healing Monk spec. I don't trust them to make two. I think that they just need to full commit to the melee build.
Yeah. Spec
It'd be
needs
hard
an
to balance.
identity for sure.
It does. It feels like it's trying to do half ranged, half melee. It's like this weird hybrid class right now, and it's just not working because you can't have it work for both.
One healer spec I really enjoyed in a Star Wars: The Old Republic was like the commando healing spec. So they changed the thought process of healers from like mana to energy, right? So like it's like a like kind of like rogue energy, so you can heal based off of that. And they also did like a combo point system, like you were speaking about before. So would it be possible to switch Mistweaver to something more of an agi and energy class as opposed to intellect and mana? And would that be even possible?
I mean, it'd be possible, but I don't think it would be a good idea to have them completely independent of mana, because then you run into the same issue of, I got pushed out of melee because of Spiteful, because of a mechanic, because of this, whatever. Now I'm just sitting here. I don't have mana. I don't have resource. I'm just watching my group die. I think that they do need to have some mana, kind of like Holy Power with HPALs, and they have a mana pool as well. But I think that it should be mostly based on like a chi resource, but then also have the option to kind of spot heal outside of that, just in case we do get pushed out of melee. We're not completely useless.
Hmm. Okay, and then next question here is kind of a question for Dobi and Trell. So I know even specifically in our guild, Like, why did Windwalker look so bad before Castle Nathrius to the point where we were like, "Hey, Trell, I know you're a monk main, but you play rogue?" And so why did it look so bad like before Castle Nathria, and then once Trill played it in the Race to World First, like everybody started main swapping to monk. Like what suddenly changed from our perception before Castle and then after Castle opened?
Stigma. I think there's always been a negative kind of perception of Windwalker. It's always been, meme walker. So I think the community is unfortunately like perception based in how classes are played. Like what's bis, what's omega bis, what's bottom, whatever. And Windwalker's really never been in there. So naturally, there's like this innate kind of, no, they're not going to do so well because they've never done so well. They've never been in the spotlight. They've never been one of those top specs like Warlock that always owns. On top of that is raid testing. Like obviously, Limit has insane raid testing that they do on PTR, where they bring in all the different specs and everyone's playing them at a very high level. So they had internally excellent data, as Max had mentioned, from Trill playing it during beta in the raids that it was, that we then saw in Castle Nathria. So I think obviously we weren't privy to any of those details because it's competitive analysis that they're doing. So like unless some other prominent Windwalkers up there and they're sharing the data they're seeing, which a lot of the Windwalkers in the Racer World First aren't sharing that information because guess what? It was a competitive advantage to have a Windwalker. So you wouldn't share that info. So you have the best players in the world playing Windwalker kind of in secret, but not really sharing that insight. And that's kind of why the pessimism lingered, is because the expectation just wasn't there.
I think this time was worse than usual too, with like the top players having the best knowledge on the class and all that. Like the gap between that and the community that was also theory crafting it in public was pretty big this time. I think Trill was playing a completely different playstyle than anyone was testing, and just making it do wild amounts of damage. And obviously, we saw that happen during the Race to World First. He's also a really good PvPer, so he got 233 weapon like the very first day possible. During progression, which is huge for Windwalker's appearance as well. And then also, I think it comes down to Rogue always brings more raid utility. If it does the same damage as Windwalker, it's just going to be a better pick in general. And if you look at the World of Warcraft raids, because Rogue can usually soak something with Cloak, it can feint a lot of mechanics, take less damage, etc., etc.
All right, and then does Storm, Earth, and Fire need a rework, and if so, how?
I think a lot of longtime Windwalker players that have played it much longer than I have would say yes. I think currently I would say no, it's okay. I think a lot of, almost all the bugs that I know of at least have been fixed for it finally, but they were there for so long through the years. I think a lot of people would just prefer to see it completely reworked.
All right. I
It's
know
a bit,
Dobi,
it's a
you
bit
have
of a weird spell for sure.
you have this other what kind of improve, like what major or minor issues could you have to monk to improve the monk quality of life from any point of view from any of you guys? And I know one of them you'll say instantly is take the GCD off of Celestial Brew. Is that the only one you would have?
True. Touch of Death activation.
Oh my god.
Being tied to autos, loosely tied to autos. And even then, it's kind of delayed still. That's kind of weird at this point. I feel like they could code that better. It's really hard to snipe things, especially in the new fast-paced environment that we live in, both in PvP and in PvE. It's really hard to snipe kill things, which is generally what you want to do. It's a weird one for sure.
Yeah, like a good example of what Dobi's saying is any targets with generally low health compared to their HP pool, Touch of Death doesn't even become available half the time when the targets enter the health range where it's supposed to be available, and then the targets just die before you can even press it. Even if you're sitting on a global waiting to press it, you just can't use it sometimes.
Is that like when you guys are fighting for the ad health on Sire on like first phase? You guys are both trying to touch a death all the little ads for maximum damage.
I mean, you just pick one, and hopefully you didn't pick the other one as the monk one. But
Yeah, that's a good example though. Those are low health, fast dying targets.
Mega, do you have any
Um,
quality of life issues that you would like to change?
Yeah, my mana bar. I think that's the biggest one. I think that Mistweaver's in agreement that mana is probably one of our biggest downfalls. Um, I would just like to see Chi reintroduced. I'd like a secondary resource outside of just mana. And I'd like the damage buffs. I'd like to be on the same level, if not, I don't want to say better because that would be kind of crazy, but the same level of damage as Holy Paladins are capable of pulling off. I think that would be very beneficial as a damage-based melee healer.
Yeah, to be honest, like when I was looking for Mistweaver specific questions, I went to the Pika Serenity Discord and I just went to the Mistweaver discussion section, and everything just
Mhm.
seemed to be mana related. Like I didn't really
Yeah.
see any other thing.
I'd also like mobility isn't a huge issue, but being in melee, being in keys, there's lots of things happening in melee. I would like to be able to use Soothing Mist while moving. It's not like a game changer. It's not that big of a deal, but it would just make things feel a little bit more fluid. Um, and then I'm gonna be completely honest. I don't know what's going on with Yulon. When you're not running Crane, that just feels like it's so expensive and it doesn't really do a whole lot. Like I was looking at logs earlier, and it's just like, man, RJW seems like it would be, the 3-minute cooldown here because of how much higher it is, or Essence Font's way up there, and I see Yulon down there doing like 3% of the healing. Like, what's happening? I know that it's positionally based, but it's just like, wow, this is a waste of mana sometimes it seems. So kind of like to figure out what was going on with that thought process.
I think a follow up to that is like another viewer had a question. It was, do you think Soothing Mist should ever be removed off the GCD?
Oh yeah, I saw that question. Um, I kind of went back and forth with it. I'm not really sure. I hadn't considered that so much. I would worry about what that would mean for PvPers because Mistweaver does have such strong single target. I'd be concerned that it would just kind of be a lay on hands type of situation, and it would just be pretty hard to stop them. They'd go them like instantly, but um, I would be concerned with how it would affect PvP, and I don't know if it's that big of a deal. I understand like the idea that enveloping and vivify are instant with soothing. I definitely understand that. So I think that either taking it off of the GCD or allowing us to cast it while moving would kind of accomplish the same goal of, I don't want an empty global and then do a bunch of healing. Because if you have to interrupt yourself getting off soothing, then it's kind of like, well, shoot, now I'm even further behind. So I see where they're going with that, and I understand the desire for that, but I don't know if that would be something that I would support.
Okay. And then Trell and Dobi, I know you guys talked a little bit about the 10% mitigation buff that was coming in a recent patch, but like I know there was a discussion, at least in the tank discords, was that the 10% buff is more impactful for Brew than any other tank. And is that true?
I think so. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I think that adding an extra 10% DR amplifies that more so because we also have a layer of stagger between that DR and our health pool. And so it increases the amount we can stagger, and it effectively increases our effective HP more than it would other tanks,
Yep.
if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a decrease. It's a decrease in stagger pressure by quite a bit. And generally speaking, Brew has like almost no armor, so you know, on a physical mitigation front, purely it's pretty up there. When you compare it to like Bear, who has multiple stacks of iron for Protwer, which is already insane for physical mitigation. So they're seeing diminished returns on on that front. So yeah, no, I think it's quite a buff to Brewmaster, honestly.
Okay, so last few questions here. Mega, Mistweaver seems to be a subpar Holy Paladin with less damage and not having much damage prevention in terms of them, like a Holy Paladin having plate gear. They also have a bubble. Like how would you change that? And is that fair in your mind?
Is it fair? No, but nothing really ever is. Um, I don't really know how it affects. So Fort Brew versus Divine Protection. If you take Unbreakable Spirit, I think is what it's called, the Paladin talent. It's a 42-second cooldown on Divine Protection, and it's 20% DR, I believe. On top of the fact that they are a plate class, and then I'm sitting over here with Fort Brew 15% DR, 15% increased health with a 3-minute cooldown. Definitely makes me feel a little bit weaker. So I'm not really sure about that one. And then we have Expel Harm, which just heals things back, but that's not really going to help you so much. Often I find myself in keys using Cocoon as my own personal cooldown. My tank doesn't really want it ever, so I use it on myself to keep myself from dying. But I understand that we are a little bit softer than paladins, so I don't know if it's a good comparison. They are the only other melee healer that we can compare ourselves to, and they are a little bit busted right now. So I don't know if the answer is to nerf paladins or buff monks, or meet them somewhere in the middle. But I'd like to see maybe a shorter, smaller personal defensive. But outside of that, we are really just a worse holy paladin. The changes to Chi-Ji / Way of the Crane, those were really, really disheartening to me. Losing out on that, the damage done and the healing done, was super disappointing. Going from BFA to Shadowlands, it'd be basically like taking away the damage and healing done for wings and just giving them a crit proc or a crit cooldown. And everyone's like, "Oh, well, that's super weak." Like, yeah, that's kind of the point. It's really weak. It's not a great 3-minute cooldown. So I think that Blizzard went a little bit overboard with pruning Mistweavers. I'd like to see some of our stuff back, to maybe put us on the same level as Paladins. I think mostly it's just Paladins have a really great toolkit for keys. They've got Bop, they've got Bubble, they've got all of these odds and ends that just work really well in a Mythic Plus environment. So
But like on that note,
uh,
like Trell, they used to be really good in the MDI, right? Like they used to always using Mistweavers just for the damage buff, I guess, and Way of the Crane was insane. So why is that not really a
Yeah,
thing
I mean,
anymore?
it was just the best healer that could allow you to do the biggest pulls. That's why it was good in MDI. It's usually something as simple as that for Mythic Plus. And
talked
because
about
Way of the
it.
Crane is
Oh, sorry.
yeah, because Way of the Crane's gone now, and the target cap would have also prevented it. It just is completely a different class in that regard.
Oh,
We had
so
talked
it's
about it previously, is that the old Way of the Crane was just so strong when you had those big MDI style pulls that you were basically invincible, just spinning crane kick and it would just top everyone.
okay. And then while we're on the topic of MDI, is Monk gonna make a comeback in MDI at all? Because we didn't really see it in the last few MDIs.
I don't see
They
them.
may the grand finals are coming up. I think they actually may play some Windwalker with the recent buffs for AoE. After the bug fixes, I think it might actually beat out some other picks in some dungeons, but the meta's changed a lot over this MDI because it's the first MDI of the new expansion. So there's just all kinds of changing parts constantly.
Yeah, just power infusion. That's all the Shadow Priest is there for, right?
Yeah, Shadow Priest coming out as part of the meta is actually pretty interesting to see for an MDI season.
And then one of the second last questions is, how do you guys feel with the removal of cancel aura roll macros? We talked a little bit about this before, but did you guys use it much? And if you were gonna use it, like where does it feel bad? Like you wish you had it?
I mean, all of us are PvEers. I think cancel roll was mostly a thing in PvP before this. I don't really know why they removed it. I think every PvPer I heard or talked to about it was just like, I don't know, seemed fine to me. Of all the things to fix for Monk, I don't know why they fixed that. But there are a few situations I would use it in dungeons, like rolling into the soak of the last boss of Plaguefall. It could be useful there, so you don't go too far out of the boss's range if you're like in a tight situation, you know. But other than that, there's not really too many applicable uses for it in PvE.
Um,
Yep,
okay, yeah.
agreed.
And then how do you fix Serenity? That's the Monk Windwalker cooldown, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's. I mean, Serenity buffs all your damage and changes how you play. Puts all your damage into into the Serenity window, basically. I don't know how they would be able to reasonably buff it to bring it up on single target because right now it seems way lower than any Storm Earth and Fire build. It would have to be brought up quite a bit, but I think bringing it up flat damage amounts would make Windwalker Burst AoE just completely broken, like we talked about earlier. So
Yeah, it's a hard one to balance.
yeah,
I almost feel like if you took like maybe you added like a mini game to it where you could extend the duration, like per chi spent or something.
Yeah, kind of like
so
Icy
that you,
Beam.
so you could at least so you could kind of get a longer duration out of it. The 1.5 minute cooldown's a little bit weird for aligning with Windwalker right now too. So maybe buff it, make it a 2 minute, make it extendable.
Okay, well, yeah, that is the end of our community Q&A. Thank you guys so much to the community for asking all of those questions. The last thing I would want to ask you guys before we're gonna get into some 5 monk dungeons. We're gonna at least do one, because it's getting a little bit late. Would you
Weekly
guys
no
have
weaver?
would you guys have any advice for aspiring monks out there for whatever spec that you guys are doing?
Play it because you like it. Don't play it don't avoid it because it's so bad. Like you can play it and still do up to, you can go up to 23s. It's just you got to find the people that are willing to work with the fact that you're not playing a paladin or whatever. Like just play it to enjoy it.
Yeah,
Trell?
second. Like monk specs aren't really. They don't have anything super unique for Mythic Plus or Raid these days, except Brewmaster has Stagger. And just the class debuffs. So there's going to be one monk spec in Raid, but other than that, there's no like crazy immunity that your class has or insane damage profile on 2 targets or 3 targets or just 1 target like Raids usually require. It's just it just depends on tuning for us.
Dobi?
Yeah, I
Expiring
mean, the hard one
brewmasters?
is. I was gonna say the hard one for Mistweaver is community perception. Like you're just gonna you're gonna get denied from pugs and stuff like that just because of the spec. Even though it's not like horribly intertuned or anything, it's just perception. So the pug life might be hard for Mistweaver, but Brewmaster, I think the spec has more nuance than it did previously in the past. In some ways, so I don't know. It's definitely a spec that has a uniquely different playstyle compared to other tanks. I think most of the tanks have a generally unique playstyle for the most part. So if you like the playstyle, I stick with it. Practice. Kind of feels like a coaching seminar, but yeah.
Well, yeah, it's okay. Well, along the lines of Mistweaver, don't worry. I felt that as Prot Warrior too, trying to get into keys at like level 15. I'm like 2k IO. I can't even get into a 12. But I definitely feel that the hate a little bit at the start of the expansion. But
Yeah, it's
yeah,
really unfortunate.
you can only do so much about community perception. So yeah, so the last thing I'm gonna do, chat, is we do have our giveaway for our mounts. One on Twitter and one on for being here tonight. If you want to join the mount giveaway, if you're in chat right now, you just do !giveaway, and you'll be able to get into the raffle for this one. We're gonna do that one right after the Twitter one. So yeah, let's go to that right now, and yeah, let's finish it out. So for the Twitter one, it's right here. Wheel of Fortune. All right, this is I practiced this a lot when we were doing choosing who gets to sit out a raid, Dobi. Back then. But this one is for retweeting the
God,
Twitter.
the wheel.
Look, I'll contact
Is
you
this
directly
thing rigged?
through Twitter.
I'm just
What?
kidding.
I'll contact you through Twitter for this one to see who won this one. So here we go. I had to remove Trell and Mega's and
I feel
Dobi's
like we
name.
need like. Is this like the Wheel of Fortune? Yeah.
Okay, well, congratulations,
epic.
Convercook. I'll message you directly to win the mount for the retweeting. And then the last one is the giveaway for in chat. So yeah, if you guys want to join, we're gonna use the Nightbot giveaway for this one. And we'll reach you out directly after for the mount giveaway. All right. 3, 2, 1. Kali Baba Gaming. Wow, you've been following for a while. Well, congratulations. I'll message you guys the winners individually. But yeah, for the podcast, that is over. Do you guys have any final words you want to tell the guys before we jump into keys right after? But we are going to end the podcast portion of this show.
No, happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Pika.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, wonderful. And then everyone in chat, there is going to be a poll up in the chat for what class would you like to see next. We can get the professionals for whatever that class is. But yeah, if you like the monk one, tell me which one do you want to see next, and the poll is available there. All right. That is it for us here. We are going to try doing at least one key. I chose Miss 15. Don't worry, I made it easy for us. We can do a 5 monk. It's not rigged at all. To show, showcase the performance of monk, whether it be from tanking, DPS, or Mistweaver. So we're going to do that right after this. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming, and I appreciate it. And I'm sure the community loves it. Have a wonderful night.
Poggers.
Poggers.